Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I'm going to be talking about Dungeons and Dragons and types of currencies within your fantasy realms. Okay? All right, now let me blow that out a little bit. So, one of the things that's important within Dungeons and Dragons, we as Dungeon Masters, we are trying to tell stories that are relevant to our times, right? So we enjoy the magical aspects of the game, but we also want to make sure that there's analogous ways for us to tell stories that are linked within our own IRL world, okay? And right now, especially within Dungeons and Dragons fantasy worlds, most of the Dungeons and Dragons fantasy worlds are missing a very important analogy within our current structure, within our current society, within American politics, culture, and society, that does not exist within Dungeons and Dragons. Now, just to be clear, Dungeons and Dragons is very careful about this, right? So one of the things is we started to move toward robots, right? And also the overall. So our world is starting to think very carefully about robots and clones, right? Well, in order to be able to tell stories about robots and clones, Eberron brought forward the Warforged, right? And so that's an analogy for us to tell stories that are rooted within our own world, so that there isn't a major element within our own world, within our own IRL world, that doesn't have any analogy within Dungeons and Dragons. Well, there is currently a big gaping hole within Dungeons and Dragons, and that is cryptocurrency, right? There are no cryptocurrencies in any of the Dungeons and Dragons settings, right? So what I'm going to be talking about today is how you as a Dungeon Master can be aware of that problem and can fix that problem, okay? But it requires understanding some basics about economics, world economics, and world finance, okay? All right, so let's talk it through. So the reason why we're talking about this today is there is a major change that is starting to happen within the world over money, okay? And there's a general shift, right? Now, our current cryptocurrency, the main cryptocurrency is Bitcoin. By the way, I'm going to date this one, right? So this is Saturday, November 3rd, 2018, because I'm going to use some numbers here, and when people watch this, it'll be helpful for them to have a time base on what I'm talking about, okay? All right, so right now, Bitcoin is at about $6,300 per Bitcoin, and gold is at about $1,400 per ounce. A 1 ounce gold coin costs $1,400, okay? All right. And then the US dollar is the US dollar. And the US dollar is why we're talking about today. So there's an event happening right now in the US, in the United States' history, where the US dollar is essentially under duress, right? So there's a lot of trouble around the US dollar. So here's what's happening right now. So the United States of America has the US dollar. Right now, the US dollar is the standard for finance across the planet, right? Without a doubt. You'll find, when people want to secure their money and they want to make it liquidatable, easy to use, be able to be spent anywhere, they get the US dollar, okay? Now, right now, there are 3 countries, right, that are making attempts at different levels to start to change that, and also to allow themselves the flexibility to not be essentially leveraged into right now, these 3 countries I'm about to talk about have reliance on the US dollar. They have absolute reliance on the US dollar, right? Their economies are not free of the US dollar. They are incredibly tied to the US dollar, okay? By the way, this all has to do with Dungeons and Dragons. Appreciate your patience. We're going to get there, okay? All right. Now, here's the thing. So these 3 countries are China, Russia, and India. And actually, let me switch the order there. Russia, China, and India. All right. So Russia, China, and India are attempting to free themselves from the US dollar. And they have to start this attempt because right now they're incredibly bound to the US dollar. They have billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of US debt. They hold US debt, and those US dollars are paid in US debt is paid in US dollars, right? So they are heavy. Every single one of these countries is heavily reliant on the US dollar, right? And they're frustrated by this for 3 reasons. So let's talk about those reasons why these countries are frustrated by being reliant on the US dollar. Well, first, Russia, right? Russia has sanctions against it from the United States of America, and the U.S. government has had incredibly strained relationships with Russia. And one of the reasons why is there are many people in America who believe that the Russians tried to change what happened in the U.S. election, which is a massive accusation, and it's a very big, bold statement, and it's important. Like it changes our relationship with them, right? So Russia's like, hey, the U.S. has given us major sanctions. We got to do something about this, and we need to free ourselves up from the U.S. dollar, right? China's like, oh, hey, check it out. We're in the middle of a trade war with America, right? And this trade war is burgeoning, right? So we need to free ourselves from the U.S. dollar, right? Now, India. Why is India trying to free itself from the U.S. dollar, right? Well, India is, and by the way, when I say they're trying to free themselves, that is based on the fact that within the last 2 weeks to a month, and maybe even beyond that, in the past, they are starting to sell U.S. debt in massive amounts. And there are a lot of news sources that are saying they are dumping U.S. debt, right? They're selling it for cheap and getting out of holding hundreds of billions of dollars of U.S. debt, right? So they're all doing this stuff so that they can be free of the U.S., right? Of the U.S. dollar specifically, okay? All right, so this is happening, and so now what's really amazing is and why does India want to be free, right? They're not in the middle of a trade war, and they're not in the middle of they don't have major sanctions the way U.S. or the way Russia does, right? Well, the reason that India is they don't know what their relationship is going to be to China, right? And so right now China is coming up is securing its position as a major superpower and making relationships throughout the world. And so if India is holding hundreds of millions of dollars in U.S. debt, it's harder for them to be a strong ally to China, right? So India, a lot of people believe that India is starting to dump U.S. debt in order to ingratiate them to China and have a better relationship with China, okay? Now, what's really... Okay, so now, let's talk about types of currency. There are currently 3 types of currency in the world. There is the gold standard. The gold standard is gold, right? That you know about in Dungeons & Dragons. There's an absolute direct connection to gold in Dungeons & Dragons. Virtually every currency in every world on Dungeons & Dragons, there's a gold standard across every single fantasy world for gold, right? There might be a few exceptions. At the macro level, gold is the gold standard on Earth, IRL. Gold is the gold standard in fantasy realms in Dungeons & Dragons, right? And there's a few exceptions, but not many, right? All right, so gold is the gold standard. That is the top of the chain when it comes to currency. It is the absolute most stable. It is even more stable than the U.S. dollar, right? Next is fiat currency. The U.S. dollar is fiat currency, okay? Fiat currency is when you have money that is backed by the statement of the government that created it that it will be of value. So the U.S. dollar is valuable because the U.S. government says it's valuable. If the U.S. government goes south and is overturned or no longer exists, then the U.S. dollar is paper, right? And you can start blowing your nose with it, right? Okay? All right, because it's worthless. That's my point, okay? And there are countries right now who their currency literally is worth the same as tissue papers. Unused tissue papers are probably worth more than some currencies on the planet, right? But the U.S. dollar is fiat currency. The last type of currency is cryptocurrency, okay? Cryptocurrency, all right? Now, with cryptocurrency, that is Bitcoin, right? Now, there's a few other cryptocurrencies, but when you talk about cryptocurrency, it's Bitcoin. Bitcoin is worth $6,300 a coin. Someone could argue that Bitcoin is worth more than gold, right? That it is right now, but the idea that it's stable is ridiculous because people have only been buying Bitcoin for less than 10 years, and people have been buying things with gold for, I think, 5 millennium? That's literally how long? It's a long time, right? So basically all that's happening. So in our real world, we have gold standard, we have fiat currency, and we have cryptocurrency. Now, what's happening now? Now one of the reasons why we're talking about this today, and why you need to be able to tell stories in your Dungeons and Dragons games, is because there are changes happening in our world that we don't have any ability to map, right, and to show and we don't really have any ability to show these stories within these games, right? So we need to be able to track that. We need to be able to tell stories that are analogous to our world when it comes to currency. And right now, there is a major drama going over on what is going to be used throughout the world. Is it going to be the gold standard? Is it going to be fiat currency? Or is it going to be cryptocurrency, right? So this is very, very interesting. And, you have all this happening, right? And so basically, you have to decide what you're going to do and how you're going to, and how you're going to base your money, right? So with that said, in the fantasy realms, let's take Faerun, for instance. In the fantasy realms, there are kingdoms. Those kings have coins, and the image of the king is printed on the coin. That coin is, what is that gold coin? Is it gold standard or is it fiat currency? Well, guess what? It's fiat currency, right? It's not actually the gold standard. And the reason why is if those realms used unmarked gold bars, then it would be the gold standard. But it is a coin marked with the king's face, right? And it is illegal in those nations. It's against the king's law to destroy that currency, to mar his image, right? And basically the reason why you see this is this exists within fantasy realms the same way it exists in America. You can't melt down even a single penny in America. It's illegal. You cannot do it, right? So that's important to understand, right? So basically, those gold coins in Faerun are fiat currency, okay? And that's important to understand that, right? So, and then also in those worlds, people use gold standard, but they use it very, very carefully, because if they're trading in large numbers without the king's coin, the king can send his armies and stop that, right? Well, get this. In our IRL world, it's very similar, right? Basically, one thing that's really fascinating about China, Russia, and India is they are absolutely dumping U.S. dollars. But what are they U.S. debt? They're dumping U.S. debt, which is paid in U.S. dollars, right? But what are they replacing it with? They're not replacing it with any debt in the world. They're replacing it with gold, right? All three of those countries are like, when you get off the US dollar, the only place to go is gold. Because and while they're trying to free themselves from US influence, it's pretty embarrassing for them because they can't replace it with any other, Europe is really, what are you going to say, the EU, right? Or the Euro? The EU is literally under Brexit right now. If Brexit works, right, and Britain's break from the European Union works for them, the EU could be in serious problems, and that means the euro could be in for serious problems, right? So that means, so basically, when you get off of the US dollar, the only place to go in IRL is the gold standard. In Faerun, right, if anybody wants to buy without the king's coin, right, which has his image and it's illegal to destroy, they have to go to the gold standard, but it's very dangerous. It's exactly the same in IRL. It's very dangerous to get off the US dollar because you have gold and you literally need to guard that gold, right? US debt is held in in paperwork, in file cabinets, and in databases, right? Guess where you keep gold? You keep it in a vault where if there's a revolution in your country, they can literally break into your vault and take all your literal gold, right? That is incredibly dangerous, right? So while India, China, and the US and Russia are trying to get away from the US dollar, they're going to have a very hard time realizing, that could be far more dangerous than they ever thought it would be, right? So what does this mean in our Dungeons and Dragons worlds? Well, let's talk about that last part, the cryptocurrency, right? So now you're talking cryptocurrency, right? Well, what do you do with cryptocurrency? So cryptocurrency has no equivalency within Dungeons and Dragons. So here's how you create it. It's extremely easy to create a cryptocurrency within Dungeons and Dragons, right? It would be an arcane currency, right? So the only people who could make it would be wizards, right? So a bunch of wizards would get together and they would say, okay, we're going to make an arcane coin, right? And basically, we will design it. So they design it, and they turn it into this ethereal glowing coin, right? And they mint 1,000 of them, right? And the way that these arcane coins are transferred is whoever holds, so the wizards give them out to a bunch of non-wizards, right? Just to get them into distribution, right? They give them to 1,000 different non-wizards. And they say, here's how this coin is used, right? One, so basically what you do is you hold out your right hand, and I'm going to give you a secret gesture. Here's an example of a secret gesture. You hold out your right hand, and you put forward your 2 rightmost fingers, and you pull back your 2 leftmost fingers, okay? And then once you've done that gesture, you say these 3 words, a secret passcode, right? A secret pass, you're going to say these 3 secret words, right? And they are perching blue raven, right? So when you have your hand extended in the gesture, and you say perching blue raven, the ethereal coin appears in front of you in your hand, okay? You just turn your hand over, and there the coin appears. Now, the person that you have shown this to, anyone who has witnessed this, if they do the same, if they repeat your hand gesture, and then they repeat the words, you may now hand the coin to them, and then they can give you goods and services in return, right? And the moment that, and after 1 minute, the coin will disappear from the person you've given it to's hand, right? And now you can never call that coin forward again, right? Now that's an arcane coin. This can be created in Faerun or any fantasy realm, right? And so now you have an analogous way to tell stories about Bitcoin. But those currencies clearly are secret, right? So the reason why we're talking about this today is you need, as a dungeon master, you are the master of 1,000 worlds. And mastering 1,000 worlds, you need to understand finance. So your realms should have gold standard, fiat currency, and arcane currency. Now that's my thoughts on the gold standard, fiat currency, and also on arcane currency, the analogy to cryptocurrency. I'm really curious what your opinions are on the gold standard, fiat currency, and arcane currency. Let me know. Please consider liking and subscribing. Thank you.